In Elden Ring, there are many beings of immense and unknowable power called the Outer Gods, who all impose their will somehow in the universe that the story takes place in. But in our case, no god plays a bigger part in the world than the Greater Will. Before the Greater Will even first became a massive player on the planet though, there were separate peoples, religions, and gods that reigned over the entire world. All life on this alien planet was said to have begun from an aspect of the primordial crucible, which was a giant tree in the center of the land which birthed life as we know it from its celestial stew. In fact, we even still have some creatures that stemmed from these times, like the Crucible Knights. God, I hate those things. And what is most likely, and something we'll dive into deeper on this list, is that the Greater Will at one point must have had a motive to gain some of this power from the primordial crucible. And that is probably why he sent a giant gold star hurtling towards the planet, bearing an Elden Beast, the same beast we fight as the final boss in the game. In fact, if we read the boss's remembrance after we kill it, it's referred to as a vassal for the Greater Will, otherwise known as someone who holds land on behalf of their ruler. The beast was a living incarnation of the Greater Will's desire for order, and from this desire became the Elden Ring itself, made up of multiple great and minor runes of power, the same runes we can activate to give ourselves buffs after killing great gods and demigods in the game. But the Greater Will needed more than just a giant beast and tree to conquer the lands between, and so it used the two fingers as a way to spread its power and message throughout the land with the help of the crones. And even more, the Greater Will needed a god who could lead its power in the land. This god is the one known as Queen Marika the Eternal, a Numen, or character class that hails from a different planet entirely that we can even play as in the game. Marika was chosen by the Two Fingers as an Empyrean, or candidate for godhood, and eventually assumed this role and was given a shadow, or wolf companion, as her aide. In her case, being Malekith, one of the big boss fights in the game. And in other Imperium's cases, for example, like Ranni, having a beast wolf like Blythe. And now with growing power and influence in the land, the Greater Will's servant, Queen Marika, broke a piece of the Elden Ring, known as the Rune of Death, and gave it to Malekith, starting the Golden Order that we hear and see in the game. This stolen rune is also the reason player characters don't die in Elden Ring and instead always respawn, as death itself was stolen from the world. But the Greater Will was not done, and now the Golden Order's main adversary in the lands was the House of the Moon, which consisted of the Carian royal family and the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria, which we visit in-game. And this is where the events of the Shattering begin to unfold. The Golden Order at the time was led by a great and fierce warrior known as Godfrey, husband to Marika, and under Godfrey's command the Golden Order won many battles and claimed the lands of the giants and the dragons. But the House of the Moon was their most difficult adversary, and a warrior named Radagon of the Golden Order was entrusted with leading the battle here. He marched the Golden Armada into the lands of Liurnia again after multiple previously failed invasion attempts. But this time something strange happened. Instead of waging war, Radagon actually did the unthinkable, and fell in love with the opposing general for the House of the Moon, Lady Rennala, who was also a main boss in the game. Together they had 3 children, Ranni, Radahn, and Rykard, and it is Ranni specifically who kicked off the events that thrust the world into a new age.
On a night of wintry fog, the Rune of Death was stolen.
You see, after the Golden Order had conquered all lands in their path, Godfrey, Marika's husband, was banished from the lands along with the Tarnished, who we play as, and stripped of their grace, being forced to endure hardship for some future plan Marika had, presumably, creating strong soldiers to fight a new foe. Marika believed that only through great trial and tribulation could great warriors be born. But just as Godfrey left Marika's side, Radagon too left Rennala's, and instead immediately went back to the Erd Tree to take his spot as Marika's second husband and new king. The division left Liurnia in pieces and caused a civil war between the two sides of the House of the Moon, the Carian royals and the scholars of Raya Lucaria. In this destruction, Ranni took her chance and stole a fragment of the Rune of Death that Marika had given her shadow Malekith before, and on that same night, the fragment was used to kill a demigod, more specifically, Marika's own son, Godwyn the Golden. who was her first child that she had with Godfrey before banishing him. This was the first time a god had ever been killed, and a first time that any in the land bestowed with grace had died for good, instead of coming back to life, due to the rune of death's power to overcome this spell. Shortly after this horrific event, Marika in retaliation smashed the Elden Ring, shattering it into multiple great runes, which is why we can acquire them in-game, and thrust the world into the chaos we know it for today, where the Tarnished are on a quest to claim back the throne. The entire ordeal creates even more questions than it answers, and leads to many theories about what exactly happened on that fateful night, and who is really pulling all the strings. Theories we'll all get into later on this list.